I don't know whose Civic this is, but can you come and move it, please? You're kind of ruining my shot. Hello, and welcome to Auto Shenanigans. How the devil are you? Have you had a good week? My name is John. Thank you very much for joining me for another exciting episode of Secrets of the Motorway. Today, I'm back in Kent to look at a motorway that might be considered a bit of a last-minute bodge job. The M26 runs for 10 miles, linking the M25 and the M20 motorways, and it's effectively a leftover from the infamous London Ringways project. Back in the 1960s, following no doubt a rather heavy session on the Ales, somebody had the idea of building 4 circular motorway-style roads in and around London. What we could do with is some sort of map showing the plans. Oh, there we go. As you can see, a fairly ambitious plan then, and had it all been built, it would have cost a catastrophic amount of money, and hundreds, if not thousands of people would have had their houses demolished or impacted by these new motorways. Predictably, the whole idea fell out of favour with, well, everybody, so by 1973 the entire project was cancelled. However, they'd already started building and completed small sections of these new motorways, most notably the M25, or as it was known back then, Ringways 4. Ringway 4 ran from Rootham Heath in Kent and round to Watford in Hertfordshire with the intention of continuing through Hertfordshire and into Essex, but the latter part was never completed. Actually, I say that, they sort of were completed. The sections that would have run through Hertfordshire and Essex were utilising existing roads and upgrading them to motorway standards, or at least that was the plan. That never happened. We know these roads today as the A414, A405 and the A10. Another section that was built but never linked up as planned ran from Swanley in Kent round to Potters Bar in Hertfordshire, and this made up part of Ringways 3. Due to the cancellation of the project, we kind of had these large sections of road that didn't really make a lot of sense, so a quick fix was needed to link them all up in order to have at least one full orbital road of London. And that last minute job became known as the M25. Fantastic. But what have all these ramblings got to do with the M26? A very good looking question indeed. It was actually the application of these last minute fixes to the failed London Ringways project that created the M26. Ringways 3 and 4 were hastily joined together to create the full M25 circle, but as a result 10 miles of motorway was left over and sort of sticking out in an odd direction. Now, they couldn't call it the M25 because that didn't really make any sense, so some genius came up with the M26, and that's what we've got. Now that we know all of that, we can see why we've got this rather dodgy looking interchange at Chevening, where if you're on the M25, in order to remain on the M25, you need to come off the M25 and rejoin the M25. According to the plan of Ringways 4, the original idea is that you would have actually carried on straight through here following the course of today's M26. But the cancellation of the project and the last minute stitch up of everything resulted in what we've got today. So today I'm going to be heading east along the M26, and a short distance up from the Chevening interchange is a gated entrance right off the carriageway. You'll find it on the westbound side, and I believe it's an access point for one of several balancing ponds or drainage ponds that are found along the motorway. These were put in place when the motorway was constructed. At these locations, it's quite common to find pollution control valves or devices. These prevent polluted water runoff from the motorway entering the natural waterways. Having crossed over the South Eastern Railway and the River Darrant, the motorway is then overpassed by the A225. And it's here that we find a secret junction that is, of course, used by maintenance vehicles and emergency services. It's quite clear that Old Orford Road was cut off during the construction of the M26, and looking at an old map confirms this. Perhaps uniquely then, this secret junction is made up using roads from a previous time. Now, you might have noticed that for a short distance, the A225 runs as a dual carriageway when crossing over the M26. At first glance, there appears to be no reason for this. However, there were some plans made at some point to build a motorway junction in this very spot. Originally, in the London Ringways project days, where the M25 and M26 meet would have been a roundabout style junction. There wasn't really a need for anything more elaborate because at this point there wasn't an M25 heading north. Had we ended up with that junction design, it would have allowed traffic to join the motorways in all directions. Of course, this all changed and they decided that a free-flowing design was needed, but rather than construct something that allowed you to travel in all directions, they went with a limited access junction, preventing you from joining the M26 heading east. It's not really clear why they made this decision, but okay, no worries, we'll just stick a new junction in, right? Sorted. But no, you're not allowed. Even before the M26 was constructed, calls were made to build a junction with the A225. However, at the time, the Ministry of Transport was against the idea on the basis that they estimated that no one would use it. And with such low levels of traffic, it wouldn't justify the cost. And why would you want to consider the future and potentially the growth of traffic numbers? That's just absurd. That said, they did draw up a few plans for the junction with the A225, and thanks to the power of Sabre roads, this is what it might have looked like. Of course, in the end, though, they didn't really bother, but they did turn this section of the A225 into a dual carriageway, you know, just in case. Which means they upgraded the road in preparation for something they already knew wasn't going to happen. And of course, had they just built the Chevening interchange with a little bit more access originally, we probably wouldn't need this new junction today. There are plans and rumours floating around that they are finally going to install a junction here at the A225. We'll see. As you make your way east along the motorway, keep an eye out to your left for the Routum transmitter tower sticking out of the horizon. The transmitter tower is over 570 feet in height. Great, but that's a little bit of a problem for me because I'm only allowed to fly the drone to 400 feet. So we might have to snip the top off a little bit. It's a radio transmitter, that much is certainly true, but what's interesting about this one is that it was the first to transmit a VHF signal way back in 1955. This allowed the listener to receive a stereo radio signal, absolutely jaw-dropping technology at the time. The tower transmitted BBC radios 2, 3 and 4 and continues to do so to this day on the very same frequencies set up in 1955.
Along with the Radio Kent aerials consisting of 6 Band 2 log periodics and a whole range of high-frequency point-to-point microwave links, there's some really huge pieces of hardware on the mast at Routum. There's the Band 2 reserve array that are installed at some sites to allow engineers to carry out repairs or maintenance on the main Band 2 array further up the mast. The main national Band 2 array, and indeed the reserve, actually transmits all of the BBC national service.
All right, mate, we haven't got time for that. Come on, let's go. There is one junction on the M26, and it's junction 2A. Junction 2A, put down the crack pipe, John, what are you chatting about? A fair question, but there's actually a reason for this, and it's down to the M20 motorway. Junction 2A on the M26 used to actually be the terminus of the M20 motorway. The M20 was actually sort of built in reverse, with junctions 1 to 3 being the last section completed. They couldn't quite make up their minds as to which way the M20 should be routed, so whilst they faffed about with that, the M20 ended at a roundabout-style junction where we find junction 2A today. By 1977, they made their decision, finally. The M20 was routed as per what we know today, and the M26 followed shortly after. Junction 2A came about then as a result of the M20 and its numbering system, and that all makes sense in the context of the M20, not so in the context of the M26. For some unknown reason, they didn't rejiggle the junction numbers when they completed the M26, so we're left with Junction 2A on the M26, but is actually Junction 2A of the M20. What? An interesting thing to look out for is the wider carriageways on the east side of Junction 2A. Originally, there would have been 2 lanes of traffic on each side heading down to the roundabout terminus. This layout was altered when the M20 was finalised and the M26 came along. Fun fact for the pub quiz, coming up right after this traffic passes us. The longest gap between any motorway junctions on our network can be found between junctions 2A on the M26 and junction 6 on the M25. It's a distance of 18 miles, which I suppose in some sense, once you've joined the M26 at junction 2A, just makes it a glorified slip road to the M25, doesn't it? Junction 2A is also the site of a proposed motorway services. In 2021, service station operators Moto put in an application to build what would become Routum Services. Primarily designed as a truck stop, it'll offer facilities and parking for HGV drivers, which, given it sits on one of the main routes in and out of Folkestone and Dover, probably makes a lot of sense. Since Brexit, Dover's turned into a little bit of a shit show, and it's a common occurrence for lorries to find themselves backed up on the M20 and M26 motorways as a result of disruptions or delays in one of the ports. A bloody nightmare then, but at least these new services might offer some sort of respite for some of those drivers who get caught up in it all. Interestingly, in 1992, proposals were put forward to build a smaller service station on the site, but the local council rejected this application on the basis it was inappropriate to build on greenbelt land and would be an intrusion of the countryside. The field next to the M26, that renowned bit of countryside. In any case, it'll be interesting to see if the councils have changed their way of thinking in the last 30 years. And that's it really. The M26 comes to an end shortly after Junction 2A, where it merges with the M20. I've come down to the National Trust's Knoll Park, a place that's completely inaccessible from the M26. Behind me is an archway that featured in the music video Penny Lane by the Beatles. Ooh. And right next door to that is where they filmed some of the Strawberry Fields music video. And it's interesting, when asked what their favourite Pop-Tart flavour was, the Beatles answered Strawberry Field, forever. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I hope you liked the video. If you did, there's a button specifically for that. And if one would be so kind as to subscribe for me, that would be wicked sweet awesome. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever it is you get up to. My name's John, you've been watching Auto Shenanigans, and I'll see you guys next time for another exciting episode of Secrets of the Motorway. Till then, take care, bye-bye.